Hello and welcome, I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Deep Dive. Now, UK's financial future is in focus once again. Chancellor Rachel Reeves unveiled the Labour government's highly anticipated budget. The headline? Sweeping tax hikes aimed at raising £26 billion by 2030. But the timing couldn't be more crucial. Now, with the Labour Party struggling in the polls and political turbulence growing, the budget is being seen as a defining moment for both Reeves and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. This is no ordinary fiscal adjustment. This is a statement of priorities. Now, as Reeves set out her plans, she announced tax rises aimed squarely at the country's wealthiest, while attempting to balance the books without returning to austerity. But the question remains, will this fiscal overhaul prove a boon for the middle class, or will it spark another wave of discontent? Let's break down what exactly is in this package. The headline reforms include freezing income tax thresholds, which means that millions of taxpayers will effectively face higher taxes as inflation pushes their income higher. This move alone is expected to raise significant funds, but it's not the only change. The freezing of income tax and national insurance thresholds until 2031 could drag more individuals into the higher tax bands. Now, this is likely to affect the middle income earners the hardest as their wages rise with inflation, pushing them into paying more despite no change in tax rates. A new annual charge on high-end property owners is also set to bring in substantial revenue. Homes valued over £2 million will incur an additional tax ranging from £2,500 to £7,500 depending on the value of the property. There's also a 3p per mile tax on electric cars, a decision that's bound to spark backlash from green groups and owners of electric vehicles who have been encouraged previously by the government to go green. Plug-in hybrids will face a lower 1.5p tax. Additionally, the government is increasing taxes on online gambling, raising the duty from 15% to 25%, likely aiming to curb the explosive growth in the sector and generate new revenues for public services. And for high earners, the tax-free limits on pension savings will be reduced to £2,000 for salary sacrifice schemes, a move that could impact business owners and high earners looking to shelter their income from tax. So why these measures? Chancellor Reeves insists that these reforms are necessary to fund public services, reduce the deficit and stabilize government borrowing. The Treasury projects a fall in borrowing over the next several years with a forecast surplus by 2030 to 31, signaling a fiscal discipline and an end to the austerity measures that have plagued the UK in recent years. Now, with a clear focus on tackling debt, the budget outlines that borrowing will fall from €138 billion in 2025-26 to €67.2 billion by 2031. The Chancellor has positioned these reforms as a key strategy for fiscal sustainability and to prevent a return to austerity. But there's more to it. Reeves is also scrapping the two-child benefit cap, which will benefit many low-income families, while other measures like a freeze on prescription charges and rail fares are designed to give immediate relief to struggling households. Yet critics argue that the burden of these reforms will fall disproportionately on the middle class, which already faces a heavy cost of living. Is this truly the right strategy for economic recovery, or is it a band-aid solution that will only squeeze the majority, is a question that's being raised by many. The response from the public has been mixed, with the middle class standing at the heart of the debate. For many, the tax freeze on tax thresholds could mean a subtle but significant increase in their tax burden. Imagine this: you're a teacher, a small business owner, or a civil servant, and your wages are rising with inflation. But because the tax bands are frozen, more of your income gets taxed at higher rates, pushing you into the next bracket, leaving you with less disposable income. Middle-income earners already struggling with rising living costs are bearing the brunt of this policy. Many in this group were hoping for a break from austerity, a sign that their concerns about the rising cost of living would be addressed without a tax hike. But it seems now that these voters are being asked to contribute more to the pot without significantly help from their own pockets. Now, for the rich, the reaction has been more predictable. Why? Tax increases on property and savings, particularly those with assets in the multi-million pound range, are drawing ire from high net worth individuals as well. Already, there are signs that the ultra-wealthy are contemplating leaving the United Kingdom for friendlier tax jurisdiction. Billionaires like steel magnate Lakshmi Mittal have reportedly moved their tax residence abroad, following in the footsteps of other high-profile figures such as Revolt founder Nick Staronsky. Now, many in this bracket argue that these tax hikes are unsustainable for the UK's competitive edge, with some entrepreneurs voicing concerns over the impact on their ability to invest and grow their businesses. But as Martin Ott, the CEO of the tax platform TaxFix, pointed out, those with wealth should consider their social responsibilities to stay and contribute to the country's growth. But as the ultra-wealthy seek out tax havens, the government must ask, how much is too much? How many entrepreneurs can the country afford to lose? Now, the political fallout from the budget is already unfolding. The Conservative opposition is up in arms, calling the tax hikes a broken promise and demanding Chancellor Reeves resign. They point to last year's tax increases and the promise that this would be a one-off, not the beginning of a cycle of continuous tax hikes. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch called this a total humiliation for Reeves, accusing her of betraying the British people's trust. Listen in.
Total humiliation, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, she put up taxes by £40 billion, the biggest tax raid in British history. She promised that she wouldn't be back for more. She swore it was a one-off. She told everyone that from now on, it would be stability and she would pay for everything with growth. Today, she has broken every single one of those promises. If she had any decency, she would resign. She has chosen to put up tax after tax after tax, taxes on workers, taxes on savers, taxes on pensioners, taxes on investors, taxes on homes, holidays, cars, I think even milkshakes, taxes on anyone doing the right thing.
But the Labour government, with an eye on reducing the tax deficit and ensuring the country can weather future economic shocks, is sticking to its guns, arguing that these tax hikes are necessary for the country's long-term fiscal health. The debate over the 2025 budget is far from over, but what's clear is that the tax reforms are a pivotal moment for both the United Kingdom economy and the political landscape. Joining us on this discussion now is our guest, Vicky Price, who is a British economist and a former joint head of the United Kingdom's Government Economic Service. Joins us live from London. I extend you a very warm welcome, Ms. Price, for joining us here at NewsX World. And now I straight want to take the first question with you. Now, given the recent tax hikes proposed by Chancellor Rachel Reeves, how do you assess the balance between raising revenue and stimulating economic growth?
In this particular budget, she didn't really do very much to stimulate growth. She's just transferring some money from the taxpayers to pay for the welfare bill, which of course is increasing anyway because of higher inflation and higher demands, but also to fund the removal of the two-child benefit cap. What she had done, though, before, I think it's worth bearing in mind that a year ago, and I think that was also mentioned at the dispatches that you had a second ago, she had actually said she wasn't going to come back for more, but she had invested quite significantly in the country's infrastructure and in other areas by deciding to go out and borrow for investment, separating what was going to be spent on current spending, where that was supposed to be covered by taxation, and what was going to be borrowed and therefore used for enhancing growth in the economy. So that had, in a way, been done and signed up for. So this budget didn't really go down that route any further because, of course, it had already required a huge amount of borrowing to be able to even follow the pledge of investing into the country's infrastructure and helping growth. So this budget is not like that at all. None of the measures that have been introduced really have any direct impact on growth. And the Office of Budget Responsibility, which looked at it, is saying that none of the measures, and there were, I think, 88 measures, passed the test of improving productivity and growth, and therefore they have discounted them from that point of view.
All right. Now, as more people are pushed into higher tax bands due to these freeze on thresholds, what do you think this will mean for the consumer spending and the UK's economic recovery?
There is a problem because, of course, taxation is going up mainly because the thresholds are frozen and many more people are now finding they're paying tax for the first time or being pushed into the higher tax brackets. There's no doubt about that. And the calculations that have been made in relation to what's happening to real disposable incomes suggest that on average they're growing a lot more slowly than used to be the case in the UK, and that's a problem. And that is a problem despite the fact that wages are rising quite fast, and we had minimum wages going up again as of next April, and they did go up again last year as well. So you are talking about people getting slightly better remunerated than perhaps had been anticipated, but they're paying more tax. And you're right in the question, what people are finding, will be finding, is that they possibly have less money in their pockets. There is, though, something that could be in their favour in terms of encouraging more spending, and that is that the Chancellor has frozen a number of items of spending in terms of their price. Those include rail fares, for example. They include prescription charges. They include also a reduction, in fact, in the energy bills of households because they're taking away some of the green levies that were attached to every bill that anyone had to pay when they're paying their electricity or gas bill. And those should help bring inflation down faster than would otherwise be the case, and that may well encourage the Bank of England to lower interest rates faster as well. And that is one way of stimulating growth. And I think that's what she's counting on, that she may get that growth to happen that way, and therefore the consumers will feel more confident about going out and spending.
Now, Ms. Price, many have also raised concerns that the middle class will bear the brunt of these tax reforms, especially with the freeze on income tax thresholds. Now, do you think this could lead to increased public discontent against the British government and Rachel Reeves herself?
It will be interesting to see how the polling goes, because the Labour Party has not been particularly popular since their election, basically. And there has been discontent, but there's also been discontent within the party itself. So it will be interesting to see how all that develops. But there are some calculations that suggest that for those earning below £35,000 a year, those measures, in fact, leave them worse off than would have been the case if the Chancellor had done what had been anticipated she was going to do anyway, the neater way of raising taxes, which would have been increasing the rate of income tax. So that we have to wait and see how the balance really falls and which bit of the economy is particularly badly affected. There is an attempted redistribution from the more wealthy to those particularly with children who have suffered recently because of the caps in benefits. And that will help. Loads and loads of children, hundreds of thousands will come out of poverty, and it should have a beneficial effect, not just short term, but also long term. So we need to probably wait and see how that impact comes through. But even that particular measure, which is taking the cap off for when you have just 2 children, if you have more, then that cap used to exist, now it's going to go away, was actually a popular measure. Not taking it off, but actually imposing the cap was popular in the country. And it's interesting, will be interesting to see how the population reacts to that overall.
All right, sure. But now, as the former head of the UK Government Economic Service, how do you also view the government's strategy of taxing the wealthiest especially with the proposed property and saving taxes? Is it fair, or could it drive capital out of the country?
It could change the behavior. I mean, the interesting thing about the fact that the Chancellor has gone for loads and loads of different measures, targeting, indeed, as you rightly say, people with big houses, expensive houses, also targeting people who do salary sacrifices and put the money into pensions, and everyone pays a little bit less tax as a result, particularly the employer in that instance, and increasing, of course, gaming duties and so on, which of course are paid by everyone, not just the certainly not confined to the rich in this particular case. But overall, taxing more dividends as well, taxing savings harder, taxing also rental property. All these things can lead to behavioral change. People may leave the country, they may decide not to invest in homes, they may decide not to invest in companies because the dividends now that they get are going to be taxed more heavily. All sorts of behavioral sort of decisions could be made, which indeed could affect how much revenue you raise from those. But the reality is that a lot of those taxes are meant to happen a lot later. In particular, the management tax is not actually going to be collecting very much if it actually becomes implemented, because it's not meant to happen until 2028. And that will only raise about 400 to 500 million, actually less than 500 a year. So you wonder why you should be going through all this and perhaps causing a behavioral change when in fact what you're going to be collecting isn't going to be that significant anyway. So we'll see what happens to all those. They're coming later, and some of those may simply not get implemented.
All right. Well, with that, I thank you, Ms. Price, for joining us here at NewsX World and giving us your perspective. Viewers, that's a wrap on this episode of NewsX World's Deep Dive. Stay tuned to NewsX World for more international news updates from across the world.